Story 1. I am a dance teacher, and I taught twins a few years ago. One week, their mom was on vacation, so their grandma brought the girls. One was crying. Grandma told her, "Sabrina, go into class. You'll be fine." We went into the classroom, and the one was still crying. So I did my best to try to calm her down and continue teaching, but she was really upset. Finally, I stopped, looked closely at her and said, "Hold up. You're not Sabrina. You're Samantha." She immediately stopped crying, smiled at me, and was all happy. It turns out Grandma had been calling her Sabrina all weekend, and the actual Sabrina wouldn't correct her because she thought it was funny. I thought it was kind of funny that I could tell them apart, but Grandma couldn't. Story 2. I'm a father to twins, and this was one of my bigger concerns before they were born. Some tips that I read about to tell the difference upon their arrival were to look at their belly buttons, as they would be shaped differently, as well as look for any unique birthmarks. The belly button trick didn't work for me, but one of my sons was born with a birthmark on his inner left leg, so that's how I was able to keep track of which one is which. Story 3. I know a set of twins whose parents switched their names permanently on purpose. After giving the twins their names at the hospital, their mom and dad brought them home and decided their individual personalities actually suited the opposite name. So their parents just switched their names, didn't have to do any paperwork. It's amazing. Now that the twins are fully grown in their late 20s, their personalities are still so opposite, artist versus banker, and their names suit them both absolutely perfectly. Also, it's a great story now that they tell everyone, which is very cute. Story 4. Parent of twins here. When they were first born in the hospital, literally a few hours old, they were in little cots with their name tags above their heads. Someone opened a door too fast, and the breeze knocked both tags to the ground. I picked the tags up and couldn't remember which was which, so I just guessed. No one else needs to know, especially not their mother. Story 5. My parents kept our baby bracelets on for weeks after we came home. I was baby A. My sister was baby B. Although last year, I got into a friendly argument with my mom when she thought I was born second. I had to get my birth certificate to remind her I'm the older sister by 58 seconds. I got pulled out of the C-section first. Story 6. My dad is a twin. When he was little and his aunt came over, she would have them stand next to each other and look at the back of their heads. She told them their names were on the back of their heads. She was actually checking which way their cowlick spiraled because it was in opposite directions for them, and she knew whose was whose. Story 7. Have twins, now 4 years old. When they were newborns, before we were able to set up a system to feed both at the same time during overnight feedings, we would hold them one at a time with a bottle in hand. Feedings would take 45 minutes to an hour sometimes. Anyway, in my sleep-deprived stupor, I fed one child, put him down, grabbed the other bottle, and forgot which child I had fed. Pretty sure one child got fed twice a couple of times while the other did not eat. Story 8. The hospital gave us labeled wristbands, so we just kept them on for the first few days. We also didn't share clothing or anything like that between them, so there was pretty much always a distinct way to tell which was which. Story 9. So my wife had picked out names a few weeks before birth. In utero, they were referred to as Twin A and Twin B. The day before delivery, she informed the doctor where each baby one was presenting. After a failed standard delivery, we went to the operating room where there were literally at least 14 people. A neonatal intensive care unit group for each, 2 anesthesiologists, a nursing student, a doctor, a nurse, and so on. The doctor informed everyone in the room which baby would be our first. Also, they used numbers at the hospital. After that, they were never in the same bassinet at the hospital, and there was a size difference at the beginning. While still at the hospital, we used nail polish on one toe because the level of absolute mental exhaustion is unbelievable. They told us before we went into the hospital that a nurse would never take both babies in the same bassinet and would always have her credentials. A nurse came in just after a feeding in the middle of the night and asked if she could take the babies. We agreed. She placed one with the other and rolled them out the door. We were dumbfounded, thinking, did she just steal our kids? We had a baby security system installed. In what seemed like 5 minutes, the lights came back on, and the nurse returned with our girls, freshly bathed. She said the nursery was empty, and all the nurses wanted to play with the babies. When they found out there were twins earlier in the day, they decided to see if they could borrow them. When she showed up the next night, we surrendered the babies eagerly. I still get their names wrong 25% of the time, and they are nearly 7. Story 10. I used to babysit these twins. Their mom always dressed them in the same exact outfit except for the color of their socks. Well, when they were 1 year old, they loved taking their shoes and socks off. I mixed them up plenty of times. Story 11. Father of identical twin boys here. The day after their birth, the boys were sleeping in a hospital cot designed for twins. The cot itself lay on a slight incline to ensure that the babies' heads were kept slightly elevated. This unfortunately caused both the boys' hospital tags to slide off their skinny little legs during the night and land at the bottom of the cot. If I hadn't taken a photo of the boys the night before and written their names on the picture using my phone stylus, then we would have never known exactly who was who. Bullet dodged. Story 12. Ours were mono D, meaning they shared a placenta. As a result, one was born 9 ounces heavier, which is a pretty large difference when you consider they were both under 5 pounds. So in those first few months of exhaustion and delirium, if we were ever concerned we had gotten them confused, we just threw them on the baby scale. We only resorted to that once or twice. That size difference still exists to this day, over 3 years later, but they also look and act very differently. Story 13. I could always tell them apart. My wife had to hold them separately a couple of times to figure it out. One of them came out with really spiky hair, so it was pretty obvious which was which. I can tell which of them I'm talking to on the phone. When my sister asked me how I knew, her son, he was about 6 at the time, said, "Well, they are different people, Mom. I don't know why, but that always cracks me up." Story 14. We hired identical twins to do the same job in different shifts. Young college kids. It was tough at first, but luckily one had an earring. Their mom, who we are friends with, says their faces are completely mirrored, but who has time to notice something like that? Eventually, it was easy to see that their personalities are very different too, which helps. But man, when they were babies, they probably were switched. Story 15. A friend and I were telling each other tall stories, and he said he was one of identical twins. The family was caught in a Balkan snowstorm, he is Greek, when he was a baby, and one of them died. He has no idea if he is himself or his brother. He won. Story 16. I honestly just took my wife's word for it for the first 6 months or so. But she named them and knew their sex and which one was where before they were born. Story 17. Not a parent, but an 11-year older brother of identical twins. About 2 months after they were born, we only knew the difference by weighing them. We knew who was a bit heavier from the start. At one point, my parents and I were in a discussion about who was actually the heaviest one, so we just picked a name for the one who was the heaviest. There is a 50% chance they had their names switched. Not that it matters, but still, it's a strange thought. Story 18. I read something once where a father asked for advice about getting one baby tattooed to tell them apart, but they were still tiny infants. One had a very serious heart condition and one didn't. If the one with the condition missed his medication, it could kill him. If the one without the condition was given the medication, it could kill him. He was asking for advice because they had spent significant time in the emergency room recently when the medication was accidentally given to the wrong baby. They had tried everything, bracelets, painting toes, and lots of other methods according to him, but they were terrified of mixing them up again, especially since the accidental medication almost killed the baby. I just remember everyone calling him a monster and me being supportive of it. He even wanted it brown so they could just make it look like a freckle to keep both babies healthy and alive. Story 19. A lady that I know has triplet grandsons. Their mother did mix them up and took them back to the hospital to have them identified by their footprints that were taken shortly after birth. After that, their toenails were painted to make sure which was which. Story 20. I am a parent to monoamniotic monochorionic twins, probably the most identical type of twins in the world. I can tell them apart in person because their personalities and expressions from birth are just different. Their faces also have slight variations that the human eye can catch. On a typical day, I might refer to the wrong one once or twice because I'm not looking at them directly in the face. Now, if I look at their pictures from a year ago, I have no idea who's who. In fact, when they were born, I paid a photographer to do studio pictures, and I forgot to mark who's who and forever will never know. Face unlock can't tell them apart either. We tend to dress them the same with different color socks or accessories to tell them apart for pictures. But we never mix them up for too long because they have different birthmarks. Story 21. I'm not too sure when freckles and whatnot show up, or birthmarks for that matter, but I dated someone who had sisters. They were identical. Many people couldn't tell them apart, but they had distinct freckles here and there that separated them. I never mixed them up because of that. Too long. Didn't read. I'm not sure if freckles are there when the babies are ejected by the mother. Story 22. I was friends with a set of twins. They called them mirror twins. They looked exactly the same. The only way anybody knew which one was which was that one was left-handed and the other was right-handed. Story 23. There is a great episode about this exact situation on This American Life podcast. I can't remember the name of the episode, but maybe some other Reddit user can share. Story 24. This is the same topic but different. I went to high school and college with twins. I was really good friends with one of the twins in high school, and the other twin went to college with me. I assumed it was the twin I was cool with, and it became super awkward quickly. Story 25. I'm a little late to the party, but my younger brother is legally blind. He tells people apart based on voices and footsteps mostly. He's used to mixing people apart, and he remembers information based on names instead of faces. Long story short, I came home from college for his birthday party. He was probably 6 or 7. The friends he invited were our next-door neighbor and 3 sets of identical twins. They just loved him. Story 26. As a parent, you can tell. I had someone ask how we told our twins apart. I would tell them they are fraternal and not identical. They would ask how we knew that. Well, one has a penis and one has a vagina. Well, they could still be identical though. I have had this conversation more than once. Story 27. I have 2 twin cousins that, to this day, I struggle to tell apart, and we grew up together. As babies, they color-coded each of them. Victoria in purple and Amanda in pink. One day, my uncle mixed them up in the bathtub, and he still isn't sure they didn't get permanently switched that day. Shortly after, they pierced their ears, giving one pink earrings and the other purple, and I still have a habit of looking at their ears before calling them by name. Unfortunately, at 24, they no longer color code themselves. Story 28. Dad to boy/girl twins here. I just wanted to stop in to say the number of people who ask me if they are identical is ridiculous. Some people even insist they are identical. I've taken to telling people he has a bigger penis. Story 29. I had identical twins in my primary 1 to primary 3 classes. It didn't take long to be able to tell them apart. Years later, I met one but didn't know which. Laughing out loud. Story 30. My grandma said my dad always pulled at his ear, so she knew it was him. They got glasses around 1st grade, and she always gave my dad full plastic frames and his brother half-wire frames. Story 31. I played with twins from age 6 to maybe 16. I never could tell them apart and would probably still have problems today if they are not talking. The funniest thing is that even the father told me a couple of years ago that he couldn't really tell them apart before puberty. He said they were basically the exact same human being. Today, they have very different personalities. Story 32. One time I was in 5th grade and I asked a 1st grader who had a twin brother for a tip on telling them apart. He answered me, "That's easy. I'm Justin. So my brother is Lucas." Story 33. I did accidentally switch my twins once. My dad and I were each taking care of one all day. We were working in shifts because they did not sleep much. My mom woke up and informed us that we had them mixed up. I didn't believe her until I lifted the shirt of the baby I was holding and didn't see the red mark on his side he was born with. We had mixed them up. My mom just left from a visit recently. My boys are 7 now. She brought it up and asked if he still had the red mark. I hadn't looked for it in a long time, so we lifted his shirt and it is still there. It is very faded, but I now know we never got them permanently confused. It is hard to tell them apart at times, but their voices are very different. If I can't figure out which one is which, I just have them speak. Story 34. Our boys are 18 months now, and Leo was born with a rare condition called hyperinsulinemia, which is effectively the opposite of diabetes. A part of his pancreas was overproducing insulin, starving his body and, more worryingly, his brain of the sugar it needs. To counter this, he was put on diazoxide, which accelerates hair growth as a side effect. By the time the boys were a couple of months old, we had Finley, who was still practically bald, and Leo, who looked like a little monkey. It was a really tough time. When he was in the hospital, we nearly lost him. Then, when we got him home, we had to give him medication 5 times a day, including 1 dose at midnight and 1 at 4 a.m. The silver lining was that we could easily tell them apart thanks to the hair. Leo grew out of the condition by 6 months, and over time Finley caught up in the hair department, so we've lost that as a means of telling the difference. But it doesn't matter at this point, as they have their own personalities, facial expressions, and mannerisms, which make them instantly identifiable to us. People who don't see them all the time struggle to tell just because they aren't familiar with these things. Oh, and if they both stood perfectly still, we'd still manage, as Finley has a small epidermal cyst beside his left eye. So, if we were totally stuck, there's always that. I was thinking about sharing a picture of them when Leo had all the hair, but I'm not sure how I feel about putting them up online for anyone to see.